Hi, my name is Moshe Kindler, and I'm the publisher of The Jewish Link,
Hi, this is Elizabeth Kratz. I'm editor of The Jewish Link.
and you're on the Jewish Link Pitch Meeting podcast. You called me, or you texted me, or emailed me last week saying that you and the OU were going to be meeting with the Biden administration, and I think you just came back from yesterday. I think you said you met with Secretary of State Blinken, and I think we're interested in hearing about that meeting, and then I want to hear about it. I think certainly Elizabeth and I are interested in hearing about it, and I'm sure we'll have questions. So Nathan Diament, please welcome to the podcast.
Nathan Diament, Director of Government Advocacy, Government Affairs at the Orthodox Union. I think that's your title these days. Has been for a long time. You've been at the OU a long time, from what I remember. And we've partnered with you many times, many different projects over the years, having to do primarily with government funding of various initiatives that are important to the Jewish world. And I think that you continue to work on behalf of the Jewish people. I guess, could you give us an update on what's been going on in Washington and on your advocacy efforts there?
Sure, and it's a pleasure to be with you both. I apologize for being a little bit hoarse. I caught something on the El Al flight, either to Israel or back from Israel, where I was on an emergency trip with OU leaders and other American Jewish organizational leaders from last Wednesday through Shabbat, and we can talk about that a little bit if you want as well. But the OU Advocacy Center, which I'm privileged to lead, is one of the leading points of contact between our community and the U.S. government. We've been doing it a long time, so we have a really deep set of relationships with leaders of both political parties. And as you mentioned, Elizabeth, we work on a lot of issues for the community, funding for schools and religious liberty. But as everybody really feels sharply right now, nothing's more important than our support for the security and welfare of Israel. That's what we are, as a community, must most deeply passionate about and feel most deeply. And so, all of that capital and goodwill that hopefully we've built over the years comes into play because politics is really about relationships. And so we've tried, to bring the voice and the views of our community into these discussions with President Biden and his team. And so a week and a half ago, just a few days after the war started, I was at a meeting with other broader American Jewish community representatives with President Biden. And then, as you mentioned yesterday, Moshe, I was part of a small group that met with Secretary of State Blinken. And what I would say is the common denominator in those two meetings, even though they were separated by, I guess, about maybe a week or so, time is a little bit of a blur these days, is that in both meetings, the president and the Secretary of State, respectively, have said the same thing, which is very clearly they support Israel in this war. Israel has the right, not just the right, but the obligation to defend itself and to respond. And they totally support Israel's actions to literally dismantle Hamas. And they've been very clear in the way, sadly, some other leaders of other sectors of American society have not been, that what Hamas did is absolutely evil. There's no justifying it. There are no excuses for it, so on down the line. In between those two meetings, not only did I go to Israel, but President Biden went to Israel. And that was I was actually there. We arrived there the same day that he did. And I can tell you, we can talk about this more if you want. The reaction and the appreciation from everybody. I mean, our group saw Prime Minister Netanyahu and a couple of his senior people, and then, as one does, we talked to people, the taxi driver, etc. Everybody in Israel was deeply appreciative of President Biden's trip. Um, it was remarkable because no American president had ever got on a plane and went to Israel during any of its past wars. So that was really remarkable. Um, and again, the Secretary of State yesterday carried that messaging through. Look, and now there have been a lot of discussions. There's been a lot in the media about is the United States in any way um, trying to restrain or guide Israel in one kind of direction or another kind of direction in terms of what they're doing. Um, what I can tell you from those meetings and from what I've seen so far is that the position of the leaders of the U.S. government is these are Israel's decisions to make in terms of how they do this operation. They're trying to, the way they put it is they're asking questions to Israel about how they're doing it, and they're trying to give advice. There was just today, the latest sort of manifestation of that is they've dispatched a 3-star U.S. Marine Corps general over to Israel. He was the general in charge of operations in I think it might have been Mosul or Fallujah. I don't remember which. In which the United States military, had a long, bloody, difficult urban warfare situation, and they're trying to bring that expertise to the table with the Israelis. But so far, everything we've heard and everything we've seen has been from a position of the American government being overall very supportive and giving Israel the room that it wants to operate.
Okay. So I guess I know it's a little early and it's not even November yet, so we can't really talk turkey specifically. But in terms of what you are there to do inside those rooms, could you share your specific role and then maybe also the kinds of, I don't know, specific funding initiatives that have been brought by the president's office to Congress, even though Congress is basically not doing anything right now because it has no speaker. But basically, how can we better understand what you're doing in those rooms and how you are representing the Jews in these rooms?
Sure. I don't claim to represent all the Jews. Nobody could do that. Not even Moshe Rabbeinu. Um, but uh,
True.
but look, on the again, what I did, and this came out publicly. What I felt was my role in the meeting that we had with President Biden. Again, just a few days after the war broke out, and in a few days, again, his support was very clear, very robust, and he made his remarks very strongly in support of Israel. It wasn't really, the meeting was not set up for it to be conversational. He gave remarks, and then he was going to leave, and we were going to spend time with his national security advisor and other senior people. Um, but I felt like somebody had to say thank you to the president for what he had done so far and how he'd spoken clearly so far in support of Israel. Both because, frankly, you got to say thank you for those things, and also to try to encourage him, right, to stay on that path. So I had never done this before, but I've been doing this long enough that I had enough chutzpah to sort of stand up and start talking, even though that wasn't the format or the plan. Luckily, the Secret Service did not tackle me.
Because you
And I was
presented
able,
because you didn't present a threat properly enough, probably.
You're
and I
not
was
scary
able,
enough.
and I was able to make the point that again, I'm sorry that again days are a little blurry, but when we were meeting, it was 80 years to the week that 400 rabbis had come to Washington seeking a meeting with President Roosevelt to try to get him to take action to save Jews in Europe. And they were refused a meeting with Roosevelt. They were refused entry to the White House altogether. And I said to Biden, quite literally, 80 years ago today, that's what happened. And here we are 80 years later, and you've invited us into the White House, and we're having, a discussion with you about supporting Israel and the Jewish community. And that's just remarkable. And we appreciate that. And we have to appreciate that. What I would say though also is, and this was sort of highlighted in the meeting yesterday with the Secretary of State. The American Jewish community is diverse. One of the things that's been striking in this current terrible situation is that just like in Israel, the differences and the debates, um, they haven't gone away permanently, but for the moment, right, everything else has been put aside, between secular and religious, between left wingers and right wingers. I mean, which is understandable. They're literally in a fight for their lives, and all the other stuff has been shoved aside and is not important right now. Um, that has largely happened in in the American Jewish community as well. There are still some folks for sure on the far left, even of the American, that are Jewish and are not there. But um, if you look at all the religious streams in the American Jewish community are on the same page. Most of the political organizations, right, left, and center, are on the same page. Again, not to say that there aren't differences, but just to give one example, which might be, I don't know how much your viewers or readers follow this, but J Street, with whom certainly we at the OU disagree a lot on their views about Israel. I would just say J Street is not in the camp of those who are calling for an immediate ceasefire. Um, and
You're saying they support Israel's right to defend itself. Shocking.
Yeah, they're supporting Israel's right to defend itself, and they're not calling for an immediate ceasefire the way some folks to the left of J Street are. Now, at the same time, J Street has said that, okay, Israel has to defend itself and Israel has to dismantle Hamas, but we should all realize that after the war is over, the only way forward after that is to get into negotiations about a two-state solution and a Palestinian state and so on and so forth, right? In the context of a meeting with government officials, the J Street representative articulated that view, which by, again, some people, even in Israel, might agree with that, right? But they're certainly not talking about that now. So going to your point about what role can I play as a representative of our community in these kinds of meetings? I was able to say, as a comment in response, so to speak, to the J Street spokesperson, say, let me just, make a cautionary note there. I didn't have to get into a direct conflict with him. Should we ultimately be working for a two-state solution or not? I was able to simply point out that right now, no politician in Israel, right, even the most left-wing politician in Israel, can stand up and say, we're going to fight this war, and one day we're going to then, work towards having a Palestinian state, in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. I mean, that is a politically impossible position to be taking, given the reality in Israel right now. So I pointed out, if the United States would articulate that position, right, it's counterproductive because you're putting Israeli political leaders in an impossible situation. Right? If the United States would come out and say, Israel has a right to defend itself, fight this war, destroy Hamas, but then we want to work towards a two-state solution, then a reporter shoves a microphone in the face of Bibi Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, Yair Lapid, or anybody else and says, what do you think of what the United States just said? And, you've put them in an impossible situation. So, I think, that was not the most important thing discussed in this meeting, but that's an example of a different perspective. And often, I'm the only Orthodox representative in the room, and I can bring that perspective to the table.
And how is the advocacy angle going on the kinds of support that Jewish people, individuals, institutions, schools, synagogues need right now in terms of safety, preparedness, and things like that? I know that's not your direct role, but I'm
Oh,
sure
it
the
is.
state okay. I know it's somewhat state advocacy, but there is a federal aspect.
Oh, there's definitely a federal aspect.
Okay.
We spearheaded the creation of the nonprofit security grant program more than 15 years ago at this point, which is the federal government grant program for security grants to shuls and schools and others. Um, Unfortunately, we started that program. It was a $25 million program. This current year, it was a $305 million program. I'm not proud of that. I'm not happy about that we've needed so many resources. Um, the president has already started proposing, what they call in Washington a supplemental appropriations package. It's basically an emergency allocation of funds, not in the regular budget cycle. And we are advocating and pressing for $500 million in that package to be for money to go into the federal security grant program for shuls and schools and other institutions in the community for security.
Okay. So what does happen in the context of, and sorry to ask all these questions to you, I just rapid fire questions.
Go
Moshe,
ahead.
feel free to break it in here. But I was going to say, what does happen when we're at this moment where the House of Representatives has no speaker? I think that the third speaker candidate is now going up for a vote at some point today, maybe, or tomorrow, or whenever. What does that do to lawmaking?
Well, it literally makes lawmaking impossible because the House of Representatives can't do anything without a speaker. Now, it hasn't actually been a real practical issue yet because, again, the war only started, 2 weeks ago. It takes some time, for the White House to get together, like, what is it we want to propose? What is it we want to ask for? We've been talking to the White House. We've been talking to allies in Congress. They're putting all that together. The president just put out his initial sort of outline of a proposal this past Friday. And it still needs to be worked on more. The Senate can go first. This is not something that you need the House to start with. So the Senate can and will go first and start working on it concretely next week, probably. And hopefully, maybe the third time's a charm. And by the time the Senate does its business, the House will be back in business and be able to move the legislation that the Senate passes. So it's definitely a concern. But again, it hasn't been we haven't yet hit the moment where the Senate has passed the bill and now we're just stuck because the House is in suspended animation.
But we could get very easily happen in a
Theoretically, we
week or
could get
two.
there,
Yeah.
but we're hoping not. We're hoping not.
I wanted to ask about, I think we have these micro issues and macro issues, and of course all of it is happening in the context of the larger international environment. And one of the things that we're experiencing here in Teaneck is a lot of on the ground hate.
Right.
It's something that's never come to our shores before, even though Teaneck doesn't really have shores except for the Hackensack River and nobody really goes there. But like, we are in a different kind of world at the moment than we were 2 weeks ago. We have outright hate. We have someone who has run off the road yesterday, or even today. I don't know when that happened. Today,
Wow.
we have outright protests going on. I don't know if you saw any of the news updates we were putting out, but in Teaneck, New Jersey, had a really sizable Free Palestine protest that basically would be illegal in Europe at this point. And
Right.
it was pretty scary.
I'm sure.
So, does our government know about this? What is our federal government thinking and doing on these kinds of topics in terms of physical safety of American citizens?
No, so the federal government very much is aware of this from the top down. President Biden has denounced anti-Semitism, et cetera. We have a very close relationship and are constantly talking to Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas, who is very concerned and very on top of this. Before 2 Fridays ago, when there was this supposed day of rage, we co-sponsored a briefing, a Zoom briefing, for schools and schools and other institutions, in which the director of the FBI, Chris Wray, and senior leadership, spoke to the community. They're very much on top of this at DHS, at the FBI. That has been communicated down to state and local law enforcement, and they're very focused on it. Now, again, as you sort of implied in your question, look, we have a First Amendment in the United States, so people can walk around and say whatever they want to say, even if it's absolutely ridiculous and repugnant, and the government can't stop that. But anything that is, moving towards intimidation or incitement to violence certainly is something that that the federal law enforcement authorities, and in partnership with state and local, are charged with, and we expect will protect the Jewish community on. And what we're trying to, what we're urging all local communities to do, and I know they've done in Teaneck, is be talking with their local police. Also engage with their local FBI field office, and the FBI field office in New Jersey, which is based in Newark, is very good and has people who lead it who are very sensitive to this issue, and they're going to do everything they can to try to keep us safe.
Yeah, I was on the call with the FBI director a couple weeks ago. It was good, and it was somewhat calming in that the Secure Communities Network and
Mhm.
CSS and the government all seem to be really much working in sync with each other. So that's a positive. There was also a how-to meeting that Maury Litwack was involved with a few days ago. And we did hear that the feed was shut down multiple times due to threats, and that even our reporter couldn't get back on the Zoom to even like look at the recordings because they had to password protect it because of threats. So there continues to be things that we want to be watched. We want to make sure there's a sort of a public record of that stuff, and that is something that we're doing at the Jewish Link. We're preparing a news brief right now about the kinds of threats that people need to be aware of even now.
There are, by the way, a lot of resources. If you go to the Department of Homeland Security website, the part of DHS that deals with these cyber issues is called, its acronym is CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure. I forgot what, but it's CISA, and they actually have a lot of resources there, just informationally and guidance to how to better protect yourselves against cyber attacks and things like that. So folks might want to take a look at that.
Right. The cyber attacks notwithstanding, which are very important, I think that one of the things that it seems to be a theme in our paper this week really is physical attacks, the risk of physical attack and bodily harm. And I really think that our government is going to need to be somehow involved with this, as we hear today about people calling for each other to take their bumper stickers off their cars if there's anything identifiably Jewish. And like, what does that mean? Are we back in 1933? Are we not allowed to wear our kippah without a baseball hat? Seat out in whatever. These are things that we're concerned about, and I think we want our government to be aware that we feel that our free exercise of religion is currently being threatened.
Yeah,
That's
look, and I think we have to be very careful to realize that this is not 1933 because the government leadership here in this country is on our side, right? As opposed to the Nazi German government, which was perpetrating the persecution itself. We government leaders here, from top down, mostly the vast majority of them, are on our side, are speaking out, are trying to protect us, and that's a fundamental difference.
so. I guess the last question I wanted to ask, which is, it's not really a question, it's sort of a baiting, I guess, which is, me personally, having worked on Capitol Hill and having experienced and become burned out by the various allegiances that people have and can change. And can you talk, I guess, about the importance of building real relationships with people who are going to support the Jewish people in government?
Yeah, look, it's absolutely essential. Not to make light of it, but one of the sort of more humorous cliches that relates to this is the saying that if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And not to be flip in such serious circumstances, but um, we as a community have to invest the time in having relationships and informing policymakers who are going to affect our security and welfare and that of Israel and other things that we care about. And we cannot take for granted, although there are many, many people in politics, including national politics, who, like us, believe in Israel and oppose anti-Semitism and so on because that is their genuine personal belief. There are others who might, be otherwise just kind of indifferent because it's not part of their value system or part of their life experience. Um, and there might be others who could be influenced in a negative direction. And we have to make the effort. And I would dare say, like, the Orthodox community has a special responsibility to make that effort, because we're more knowledgeable in some ways, and we're more passionate, and we're more motivated generally. I think, again, even in the current situation, I don't want to take away at all from non-Orthodox segments of the Jewish community that are really, really engaged and are frankly just as much in pain over what happened. Um, they have connections to people in the communities in the South who were killed and who were taken hostage. Because frankly, most of those communities were full of secular Jews, not religious Jews. And and they know. I have colleagues who know hostages and know the families of hostages. Um, but in the Orthodox community, we need to really step up, in our efforts as well. And one of the things we're urging, there's a lot going on in the community. I know when I flew to Israel, my daughter lives in Teaneck, uh, so I was only taking hand luggage. I was going for such a short time. I took 3 duffel bags that were packed in Teaneck by folks for a unit, and I know there's more and more like that. Um, and there's lots of tzedakah, and there's all that kind of chesed and support. Um, we need to be, we at the OU Advocacy Center are asking, and are trying to coordinate with shuls to be inviting their members of Congress to shul in the coming weeks. We need to thank and appreciate the members of Congress who are standing with us. We need to strengthen those who might be, as this goes on over a period of days or weeks or longer and things become more difficult, we need to strengthen those who might waver. And there's a different kind of dynamic, by the way, between a member of Congress and their constituents when they're meeting and talking back at home, as opposed to down in Washington. And they're realizing that they're with people, who are their voters and so on. And we think that's a simple step, but an important step for the community to take. I think we also expect sometime soon to be calling people to come to Washington, but we're not ready for that yet, and we don't need that quite yet. But people need to engage with their members of Congress to keep them strong.
Okay, that's really good advice.
Yeah.
Thank you for the update, Nathan Diament from the OU Advocacy Center.
Yeah. Hey, Nathan, you look really tired, so I don't.
I need to get at least one question from Moshe. Come on.
Okay.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. I was rushing. I didn't prep properly, but I will say that you look pretty tired, and I don't think you're going to be getting much more sleep. So that's for sure. So keep up all that you're doing on behalf of the Orthodox Union and the Jewish community. So for sure.
Thanks for having me, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks for being with us on the Jewish Link Pitch Meeting podcast. If you would like to participate or be in touch with us in any way, please email us at editor@jewishlink.news and follow us and find our podcast wherever you find podcasts.